crafters, and welcome back. My name is Deepa from DeeZinesByD, and today I have a bit of a different video for you. I'm going to be showing you how to do ink smooshing before and after foiling. So if you were wondering if, adding ink and water to your cardstock might damage your foiling, this is the video for you. I'm going to be showcasing products from the latest Spellbinders release, which is the Victorian Collection. This is one of the collections available now. And you can see that they're gorgeous florals. So these are the sets that I have. This one is the mason jar and lavender set. You can see that, the little stalks fit inside the jar. There's the Glimmer Ferns Set. This is what we're going to be foiling today. It's just like a nice large glimmer plate. And then we've got the camellia, which is a beautiful flower. And you can see that these dies are etched with the amount of times that you need to be cutting them out. And then it's just a matter of shaping and putting them together. So let's start off with our two panels. So these panels are just slightly smaller than 5 by 7 inches. I wanted them nice and large. And for one panel, we'll do ink smooshing afterwards. Now, my two cards are going to be different in that one is going to be masculine and one is going to be feminine. So the one that I am going to be doing ink smooshing on first is the masculine one. I'm going to be using a bunch of greens and browns, and I'm using Altenew inks. You could use any inks that you have on hand. Anything works, but for this, I do recommend a dye ink. But I mean, overall, I don't think it really matters if you're going to be doing the ink smooshing first. So I'm just adding all of those inks to this craft mat that I have. Now, I love this craft mat. I think it's a Tim Holtz one. It's just great because I can not only ink smoosh on top, but it is heat resistant. So then I can use my heat tool to dry my panel as well. So once I've got, the desired colors over the panel, I'm going to do a bit of splattering with the same ink colors just to give it a nice artsy feel to it in the background there. So once I've got all of my ink smooshing and my splattering all done, I'll just dry that panel completely. You can see it's a bit warped because of the heat tool. No problem. Just go ahead and put that through your die cutting machine a couple times. It'll flatten it right up. Now that it's more flat, and when you do the hot foiling here, it's also going to flatten it a little more, so not to worry. I've got some gold foil, and I'm putting the Glimmer Ferns on top and hot foiling that with my Glimmer system. Now, while that's heating up, before I actually put it through my die cutting machine, I like to prepare other things. So I have these inside sentiments. This was released with Victorian Collection earlier this year, and I'm just getting that ready on some dark green cardstock, and again with some more gold foil. You can see now I've foiled this panel, and it looks stunning. There's a little bit of overfoiling, but that's not anything to worry about because our background is pretty busy. You're not going to notice too much. Now I'm going ahead and I'm foiling that sentiment, and as I'm heating that up, I'm getting ready this panel where I'm going to be foiling the Glimmer Ferns before I do ink smooshing. So I've just used some silver foil here. You can see now I've got this little sentiment part done, so I've peeled that off. Again, I'm heating up that panel and I'm foiling the silver foil for the Glimmer Ferns. And as I'm doing that, I'm getting this next little piece ready. I'm going to be foiling the Happy Birthday, which is from the birthday unboxing set from last year. And I'm using some Viridian Green foil there. So you can see I have my panel foiled in silver. I've got a bunch of overfoiling. Not a huge deal. You can use a Tombow mono eraser or this rotary eraser that I've got from Couture Creations in order to clean that up. You can see I've cleaned it up here on the green cardstock. It's a solid core cardstock, no white in the center, but it does kind of lift off a bit of that cardstock. It makes it lighter. So I just take my fingers and just rub wherever I've erased, and the natural oils from your fingers tend to darken the cardstock a bit. So now my sentiments are done for this card. I'll put those aside along with the card panel, and we'll move on to the second card. So now I'm using a bunch of pinks for a feminine card. Again, these are all Altenew inks. You can use what you'd like. Now, I do want to mention for smooshing on top of a foiled image, I don't recommend using your oxides. I don't recommend using pigment ink because that ink is going to sit right on top of your foil. It's going to muddy it a little bit. It's going to make it a little less lustrous, less shiny. It's going to take a bit of effort to kind of clean all of that off. So I do recommend using dye inks for ink smooshing on top of foiling. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, keep your panel not like you don't want it super saturated with a bunch of liquid, with a bunch of water, right? So all I'm doing is I'm adding my lighter colors. I'll add a bit of the water, I'll take it up on my cardstock, and then I'll dry it with my heat tool. So I'm drying in between a bit more often than I did the first panel. And you'll notice as I dry, I'm mostly drying the edges. I'm not going over the glimmer foiling like too long. Okay, I'll go over it a bit to dry the pieces in between, but I'm mainly drying the edges. So I think the main tip with smooshing on top of foiling, it's perfect. It works perfectly well, just as well as smooshing before foiling. You just want to keep your cardstock a little drier than you would if you were smooshing first. Now, I did try this being a little more heavy-handed with the water, and if you add a lot, I mean a lot of water, and make this panel very wet, wetter than my first panel, the foil will tend to start disassociating from the paper because the paper is getting really wet. So I do just try your best, recommend, keeping that as dry as you can. Okay, so let's move on. We've got both panels done. I want to add a focal point to the female or the feminine card. I'm using the camellia dies here. So as I told you, the dies are made in such a way that they've got the number of times you need to cut them out. The largest set of petals is 3 times, and then the other two, the leaves and the smaller petals, are 2 times. You can cut out the leaves a third time if you want to. It says 2 to 3 times. It's completely up to you and how many leaves you want to use. Okay, so I'm adding some Altenew inks. I'm adding a darker velvet red color to the center of the petals, and then a lighter frosty pink. And then blending outwards to the edges of the flower petals, which are going to end up just being plain white. Now, looking at this, you might be thinking when you put this together, you're going to cover up all that red anyways. Now, I did it just for the sake of making sure that my blending turned out nicely. If you feel that it's going to be covered and you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. Do what works for you. If you wanted to just use one plain piece of cardstock without ink blending and just use pink or red, do that as well. Do what you think is going to work best for your card. Now, the one tip I do want to mention if you are adding color like this in gradients, so I really want that gradient of color, is as you're moving into your smaller petals, you want to make those darker. So I want the center of this flower to be darker than the edges of the petals. So I'm using these colors in the same manner. Now I'm going to put these together side by side so you can see that color gradient in the different layers. We have the lightest layer being the largest petals and the darkest layers being the smallest ones that are going to be in the center of the flower. So we're going, from light to dark, from the largest to the smallest petals. So now I'm going to start ink blending my leaves. So I think I cut out 3 sets of them because I did want to use some of these leaves on the masculine card as well. And I'm adding some Forest Glades Altenew ink to the front and back. Okay, you don't have to add it to the back, but again, if I'm going to be curving up my leaves and stuff, I want to make sure if you're looking underneath, you're not going to see white. Then I did some, adding some shading with the darker evergreen ink. And once that was done, I moved on to my shaping. So I've got Susan's garden toolkit here. This is perfect for all of your flower shaping needs. It's got a little foam mat, which I don't really need because I have a larger one. And then I've got all of the stylus tools and everything that you need for shaping. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm a bit lazy. I don't always change out my stylus tips properly. And I use that larger ball to kind of shape the largest petals for this flower because I needed a larger ball. That worked best, but I only need it for this larger set of petals. Once I start moving into the smaller sets, the medium-sized ball works best. So all I'm really doing, and I'm using the same steps for all of my layers of petals, is I'm just rounding out the center of the petals first with the larger ball, and then I'm taking the medium ball and I'm just wanting the edges of those petals to kind of fold a little and have a little bit more of a realistic look. So all of the edges of the petals are being rolled along with the center to round them out. Then what I like to do is to kind of just do a bit of a scribble, like lines on the petals to create these striations. You can see, it's hard to see in the video, but in real life, there's these lines that form the striations on the petals because petals aren't always fully smooth. So I like to add that little feature. And then I will turn it over and round out or allow the leaves to move upwards by putting the little stylus in the center of the flower. So that just causes those little petals to just pop up and create like a cup. So here in the video, you can see I've moved on to the next set of petals, which is just a bit smaller. So you don't really need the larger stylus tool there. But I basically shaped everything in the exact same manner. You can see you don't need as much shaping on the inner portions as you do on the largest one, but they come out nicely. Now, I like to keep that in that little divider tray. It's actually a palette for painting, but it works well for keeping your little die cuts as well. Now I'm moving on to the leaves, and I've shaped it a bit with the stylus, and I'm using this little loop tool to just create striations on the leaves where the veins would be. So you'll notice this flower has a lot of this leaf has a lot of jagged edges. So these are those types of leaves that have all of those veins coming into the center. So I just really wanted to make it look a bit more realistic and like the leaves of a camellia. So now that I have everything, I've got the ink on it, I've shaped everything, it's time to put it together. And I love using this Cosmic Shimmer acrylic glue. It has the right amount of tackiness to help you get your flowers together without having to use a hot glue gun. So I just take a little bit of that glue out onto a scrap piece of cardstock, and then I cup my flowers. So I'll hold them in like a cup fashion with the ends of the petals, and then I just dab it into that glue and stick it down onto the first layer of petals. See, I'll just cup it, pick up my glue, and as I'm placing these leaves down, I'm just turning them a little bit just to allow the different petals to, stick out in different ways so that it's not all, uniform. You want it to have that randomization that nature has. So I'll continue to do that as I move into the smaller and smaller petals until I get the whole flower together. As you can see, I like to use my stylus tool to kind of just stick down all of those layers from the center of the flower. So you're keeping those petals completely loose. You don't need to glue those together. If you're an avid crafter and have been doing shaping your whole life, you probably think, of course, you don't glue down those petals. But when you're new to doing this, it's hard to completely know exactly what you're gluing down and what you're not. So now that I'm getting to the center of the flower, you can see that darker red in the center is really standing out. And I don't know, I think I was subconsciously inspired by my nails here because they have the same tone. It's like that dark red at the end, which is in the center of the flower, and then it fades out to white. And I didn't plan that. It was purely subconscious. But yeah, that's how the flower looks in the end, and it looks gorgeous. Okay, so moving on to a sentiment for this card. I've got the Hello Friends sentiment set here. This is a glimmer foil set. Now, if you didn't know, this comes separately, but it coordinates with this other set, the wonderful script sentiments released by Yana earlier this year. So you can see in that script sentiment, it's a die set. You can cut the main sentiment and the shadow, or you can foil the sentiment using the Hello Friends Glimmer Foil Sentiment set, and you can use the dies from the other set to cut that out. It fits perfectly, and they all kind of coordinate and work together. So I always love to grab, the dies and the glimmer plates, and it also works like that for the Magnolia set that came out from Yana last year. There was a bunch of scripty dies that came out there along with foiled plates for the sentiments, and those work together in the exact same manner as these. So I went ahead and I had foiled the sentiment in a light pink foil. Now I'm going ahead and assembling the cards. So I've matted both cards, one with the pink cardstock and one with a dark green. The card base is 5x7. As I mentioned, the panels we originally used were a bit smaller. They were 4 3/4. I think it's actually 4.5 by 6.5. So that's for a 5x7 card. I put my panel down. You can see it's nice and flat now. Again, if you're having problems with warping, you can put it through your die cutting machine on its own just to flatten it out. Now I've added the camellia there, and I'm adding the sentiment. So I've got the hello, which I had foiled and die cut, and then I also foiled the friend. And I put that on a little banner strip, and I'm just cutting that off there. And that is the feminine card. Now you can see I am adding a few of the leaves, and on its own, it's just way too pink. You need a color or something to break up all of that pink and red. So these leaves really work nicely to do that. So I'll just tuck a few of them underneath the flower just to really make that flower stand out and break up all of the pink within that card. So I'd say this card is pretty much complete. We will add some embellishments in the end. So let's move on to the masculine card. Now we have this nice inside sentiment. So those sentiments, that glimmer sentiment, that nice long sentiment can be used on the inside of the card, or you can use it on the outside like this. So I love that there's, you can use it however you'd like. And for masculine cards, I think it works perfectly. Because you don't really want to be putting a flower on here. So I'm tucking the little leaves behind that large sentiment, and then I'm going to place the happy birthday sentiment on top. Now I went with happy birthday here, but this could also work for Father's Day or any other masculine type card. And that's why I like those glimmer ferns, because you can use them for feminine or masculine purposes. So you can see I'm finishing these cards off with a bit of bling. I've got some clear gems for the pink card, and then I'm just going to add a few small black onyx gems to the masculine card. Don't want to make it too feminine. And if you look at both of these cards side by side, you really wouldn't be able to tell, oh yeah, I foiled this one first and then I did some ink smooth. Like, you'd have no clue the order that I created this card. It really just comes down to preference. And so it's up to you which one you choose to do. I think I'd probably just foil first and ink smoosh. I don't think it makes too much of a difference. So yeah, those are my two cards. I hope that you might have learned something new, and I think with any type of foiling, as long as you don't get your paper too wet, you're good to go. So these are my two cards, one featuring the chameleon and feminine, and one featuring those leaves and is masculine. Now, these are two other projects that I created with the sets I showed you in the beginning. This one is with the mason jar and lavender. I absolutely love that you can stick the stalks inside the mason jar, and I really tried to make my jar look somewhat glassy. Now, I also created this wire wreath, and I introduced the Floribunda Rose, which was released last year with Susan Set, and I paired that with the camellia and the lavender, and you can see it just turned out beautifully. I absolutely love that wreath. And that's all the inspiration that I have for you today. Now, these two last projects, I will have reels for them, which I'm going to be posting on Instagram, so follow me there at DeeZinesByD. Or you could just like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. Hit the notification bell to be notified of future videos, because I will be posting those reels on here as well as video shorts. Now, everything that I've used is linked in the description below. You can check out the store. There's a direct link below as well. And yeah, I hope that you found something you like here. Just a disclaimer, just wanted to say sorry about my voice. I'm a little sick, so it's kind of in and out. So I hope that didn't disturb the video too much. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.